Last year, I made a video about the Swedish island of Gotland that faces problems with over-tourism. Real estate prices are going mad, people are flocking to the island, and there's water shortages in summer. The people of Gotland are dependent on tourists, but they're also fed up with having to deal with all of those issues. Well, it could be worse. It could be Barcelona. The tension between locals and tourists in Barcelona has been brewing for a long time. Before 1990, there wasn't any talk about over-tourism in Barcelona, but things changed in 1992. That's when Barcelona hosted the Summer Olympics, and shortly after that, the cruise ships started to arrive. Well, technically cruise ships did arrive before 1990 as well. In 1990, 115,000 cruise ships visited Barcelona. But let's compare that with 2017, when that number was 2.7 million instead. Barcelona has a population of 1.6 million people, but it's visited by between 12 and 15 million tourists every year. It's a very popular destination in other words, and it's easy to see why. The climate is mild, and the city has a beautiful location overlooking the Mediterranean. And the city is famous for its art and culture and architecture. Gaudi and other Art Nouveau architects have helped shape the city into something quite unique and spectacular. The food is excellent as well, and in general it's a trendy city. People all over the world like Barcelona. And that means that the city gets a lot of tourists. But what's so bad about that? Barcelona is dependent on tourism, and that's perfectly fine. Tourism brings money, and that's usually a positive thing. It only becomes a problem if a city adapts itself and caters to visitors instead of locals. I mentioned that Barcelona gets millions of cruise ships every year, and all of those cruise ship passengers get off their boats to look at the city. They marvel at the architecture, they visit museums, and then they go to touristy cafes and restaurants. But they don't spend a lot of money on other things, which means that savvy business owners realize that the way to make money is to open more touristy cafes and restaurants. And possibly souvenir shops selling useless junk as well. So the authentic restaurants and shops and cafes for local people get replaced by touristy crap. But that's not the only problem. Far from it. And speaking of problems, one problem that you might want to be careful of is identity theft. And that brings me to Aura, this video's sponsor. You've probably heard that TikTok might get banned in the US. It's all because of fear that they might be leaking your personal information to questionable actors. Well, that's already happening regardless of the potential TikTok ban. There are data brokers online selling anyone's data for just a few bucks to anyone. Big companies with poor security are getting hacked every day, and your personal information is being sold on the dark web, so spammers, scammers, and identity thieves can target you, and they face zero consequences from it. A lot of personal information is publicly available in Sweden. Your name, your birthday, your salary, all of this can be looked up online. But these data brokers are selling a lot more than that. And all of this information can be used to steal your identity and cause unimaginable problems in your life. That's where this video sponsor, Aura, can help. They will identify data brokers who are selling your information and submit opt-out requests on your behalf. Try Aura for a few weeks and you'll stop seeing your information on these sites when you search yourself, and that will also lead to less spam. Aura will also continuously monitor the dark web and alert you if they find any personal information that's being shared, or if anyone tries to use that information to access credit cards or bank accounts. Plus, they'll give you up to $5 million in identity theft insurance if the worst case scenario happens. The Aura app also has a VPN with more than 100 virtual locations as an added bonus. Visit my link aura.com/3starvagabond to try Aura for 14 days for free. Now let's get back to the video. If you've seen my video about the island of Gotland, you probably recognize a few of these points. The main problems are basically the same on Gotland as in Barcelona, but on a completely different scale. And when it comes to real estate cost, Barcelona definitely has a problem. Barcelona doesn't just get cruise ship passengers visiting the city, they also get visitors who spend the night. And with so many visitors who want to spend the night, people started investing in apartments they can rent out to tourists. Estimates from 2020 say that home prices in Barcelona are 17% higher because of Airbnb rentals. In the past decade, rent has gone up 68%, and the cost of buying a house has gone up 38%. I can't say how much of this is because of Airbnb rentals, but it's still making the city unlivable for locals. They can't afford to buy houses, and they can't afford the touristy cafes and restaurants. And authentic local shops are replaced by less useful shops, if I put it diplomatically. This leads to a lot of frustration, and the locals aren't happy with these changes. They have a beautiful city that they no longer can enjoy. And that frustration reached a boiling point in 2024. Barcelona tourist protests were all over the news in 2024. There were demonstrations with people chanting, "Tourists go home," and they sprayed visitors with water guns. That doesn't sound all that bad, to be honest. Quite refreshing on a hot summer day in July. But the message behind it is quite clear. People are fed up with the problems that tourists bring. The YouTuber Ben Morris reported that Barcelona is a Spanish city that doesn't want UK tourists to come, and he showed several ways in which tourists get bad service here. So it seems pretty clear-cut, doesn't it? Barcelona is united against the hordes of visiting tourists, and they want them out. Well, it's not that simple. The protests in 2024 centered around a demonstration with 2,800 participants. It's from this demonstration that you see most clips of people squirting visitors with water guns or holding banners saying "Tourists go home." But the protests aren't as widespread as you might think. Plenty of people visited Barcelona in 2024 and didn't see any protests at all. Millions of people, in fact. And it's not like Barcelona doesn't want tourists. Of course they do. It's a large part of the economy. Local people in Barcelona depend on tourist money, so it wouldn't make sense for all of them to try to push away all the tourists. And they don't. The demonstrations were a bit hyperbolic. They wanted to raise attention to a serious issue, but the "tourists go home" was most likely not meant literally. I think that it should have been more like, "Tourists, some of you go home, and how about you don't visit during the busiest summer months? Come back in spring or autumn or winter like now, when there's fewer people around." Aside from demonstrations and some water squirting, there's actually something happening about this whole situation. On June 21st, 2024, the mayor of Barcelona promised to get rid of all short-term apartment rentals by 2028. The living costs in Barcelona have skyrocketed, and even if people want some tourism, they don't want it at the cost of not being able to live there. Spain is the second most visited country in the world, and Catalonia, where Barcelona is located, is the region that receives the most international visitors. And there's a lot of apartments being rented out illegally to all of these tourists. Since 2016, 9,700 illegal tourist rentals have been shut down, and those are just the ones that got caught. This complete ban by 2028 is an attempt to get rid of them, and to solve the housing prices in general. But there's more. Spain is also planning on introducing a 100% tax on homes bought by non-EU citizens. I assume that people in the UK who bought summer homes in Spain are excrementing bricks right now. So people are trying to do something about the housing problems, even if there are many skeptics as well. Some believe that it won't really solve the problem, and some believe that it won't really have an effect at all. Either way, it's just a proposal so far, so I guess we'll see what happens in the future. Now, you might be wondering why I'm making yet one more video about over-tourism. Well, there are many reasons. For one thing, I think that it's an important topic. I travel a lot, but I don't want to be a burden to the places I visit. I think that you can visit a touristy place without adding too much fuel to the fire. You don't have to visit the most touristy places, and you don't have to stay at the most touristy Airbnbs. And you can visit local cafes and small restaurants instead of waterfront tourist traps. I'm not visiting Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, for example. There's already way too many people there. And I also don't like standing in line, so maybe it's mostly that. I usually prefer more odd things to have a look at. The baby drop-off in El Raval, for example. It doesn't look as impressive as Sagrada Familia, of course, but the history behind it is absolutely fascinating. And when I'm visiting the Golden Square with all those fantastic examples of modernist architecture, I don't have to look at just Casa Mila or that other casa I can't pronounce. Those are the most famous ones, of course, but there's so much more to see if I just walk around a bit. I can't pronounce any of the places I've seen though, because my Spanish is even worse than my English. But I have another reason that I'm making yet one more video about overtourism, and overtourism in Barcelona in particular. I just want to have an excuse to walk around in Barcelona and enjoy this magnificent city. Maybe I'm being a complete hypocrite talking about overtourism while obviously adding to it, but in my defense it's January now, not the middle of summer. So at least it's not as crowded as it can get, and one of the main points about overtourism is that it's concentrated to certain times of the year. If you visit in off-season, there's a much greater chance that you're actually doing some good instead of making things worse. And with that, I think it's a good place to end this video. I hope you found it interesting. Like and subscribe, but most importantly, have a great day.